Southern Oregon State College, now called Southern Oregon University. Yay. In Ashland, also home of Bruce Campbell of movies fame. There he studied business, chemistry, and French. He spent the years studying abroad in France and has since been passionate about traveling internationally, going to such places as diverse as Asia, Africa, and Mexico. He's an avid outdoorsman, enjoying hiking, backpacking, camping, mountain trekking, and scuba diving. He's co-founder and current president of NIWA, an organization dedicated to helping indie writers from the Pacific Northwest write, publish, and promote their work. Adam currently resides in Vancouver, Washington, where he is an active member of St. Joseph's Catholic School. Adam Copeland.
Good evening. I am Adam Copeland, author of ECHOES of Avalon, which you can find at Jacobson's and here this evening. However, this evening I will be reading from my prologue, which is the sequel. Like that? Tonight I'll be reading from my prologue that is a sequel to my novel, ECHOES of Avalon. And you don't have to have read it to appreciate the prologue, because the job of a prologue is to tease you with just enough information that you want to turn the page, read the next chapter, and indeed read the whole book. And my goal is to get you to read the first book so you can understand what the heck all this imagery is about and what's going on. ECHOES of Avalon is a historical novel, or historical fantasy, excuse me. The premise of which is, if you could go back in time and witness the event that inspired a fairy tale, chances are it'd be far more fascinating than the actual resulting fairy tale, because people are more complex than the two-dimensional fairy tale characters we grew up with. You know, the good guys don't have white hats, the bad guys don't have black hats. People are complex, their motives are a bit different than what you would expect in a fairy tale. And because of that, the complexities and the characters are much more interesting. And that was what I had in mind when I wrote about an Irish knight who went to the First Crusade. Basically came down with PTSD because of the horrible things he saw and experienced. He lost his faith in people, lost his faith in God, and then he finds himself on the island of Avalon as a knight protector for a secret school where nobility are sent to learn how to live in peace. Because in this era in Europe, of course, there's nothing but warfare going on. And there's a group of people trying to attempt to teach children how to live in peace. And he's a knight protector there. And while he's there, he's tempted to believe in people again, fall in love. That is until the bad guy comes along with nefarious deeds, kidnaps the princess closest to his heart. And Patrick realizes that before he can battle monsters, he has to first defeat his demons. And then rise to the occasion, be the hero he needs to be, beat the bad guy, rescue the princess, save the day. However, in doing so, he makes a choice, bends the rules in order to save somebody, and he's told that there's consequences for that. You can't break the rules. You can't just do what you want. However noble your feelings may or motives have been, you can't break the rules. And that's what the prologue is about, the results of that. And it goes something like this. They say when you're dying, your life passes before your eyes. They're right. What they don't tell you is that life mocks and lectures you while it's happening. Sir Patrick Gawain did not need that. Not now. Not while his sword swung at him at eye level. It was curious that the wide swinging arc of the weapon seemed to slow down the closer it got to his head, allowing him to take in the scene around him and dwell on it. Indeed, everything began to slow down, taking on a dreamlike, or rather nightmare-like quality. It was as if the world were suddenly submerged beneath a sea of despair, where all motion became hindered by watery grief. Even sound became muffled, all save Patrick's labored breathing and pounding heart. That end, though he knew it wasn't possible, he swore he could just make out the prayers he knew the monks were chanting in the church. To his left, Green Springs burned. The central keep tower guttered like a giant candle whose flames seemed to lick at low-lying dark clouds turning them into a foreboding brimstone glow that swirled with the colors of an angry sunset. Individual flames struggled to free themselves from the mother flame, dancing ecstatically when they did. They writhed and twisted in terrible reds, yellows, and oranges as they floated skyward. Their freedom was fleeting, however, as they burned themselves out to become dark smoke that added their gloom to the sky. To his right, he could see the flanks of a group of enemy horsemen disappearing into the tree line beyond Green Springs. In the dream motion, the earth their horses kicked up hung in the air, gently rolling its suspension. They were in close pursuit of Amy, who held the object of all their troubles and their salvation. The horsemen were much closer to her than Patrick wanted. He had hoped to give her a much greater head start, but even that had not gone according to plan. The enemy would be upon her soon, and her only protection was her one-time rapist. Around him the battle raged. Movement may have been dreamlike, but the images were crystal clear, allowing Patrick to be more than painfully aware that his friends and comrades were dying. The combatants danced the deadly dance, sometimes circling one another with tools of destruction, exchanging kisses of pain from a distance, other times engaging with an intimacy closer than lovers, caressing with crushing touches. Here a pair of lovers, there a threesome, there a group effort. As time increasingly slowed down, Patrick became aware that there was an overall rhythm to the movements. 1,000 rising arms and falling bodies danced in tune to the same music on the dance floor. The music was clashing steel, the song, men's cries of pain and anger. Just when Patrick thought his perception couldn't become any more distorted, movement would suddenly speed up, bypassing normal pace, quicken to an impossible speed, then return to dream motion. He couldn't help but feel these odd vacillations made the combatants look like puppets at the end of strings being hectically pulled. The heat of battle sometimes distracts from simple facts. For during those moments when the passage of time almost stopped, Patrick realized it had been raining for some time now. Raindrops were held suspended in the air along with drops of blood and flying sweat, each trembling as they tumbled down to explode in miniature against earth and puddle. The last of the mounted avant-guardsmen was being pulled down, horse and all, by a mob of attackers. His horse cried in pain. Even before the knight hit the ground, his attackers were descending upon him, striking with sword, axe, halberd, and maul like farmers thrashing wheat. Nearby, Sir Corbin twirled with a longsword in each hand, surrounded by opponents. Sir Peridor was struggling off his back, just to have an attacker palm his face with his hand and force his head under the water of a deep puddle. Sir Wayland and Sir Brian fought back to back and were running out of precious space to maneuver. Another avant-guardsman, whose face was obscured, was on his knees with his arms held out to the sides. Two enemies constrained each arm while a fifth was pulling his head back to expose his throat and run a sword across it. Patrick's heartbeat drummed louder. How did things go so horribly wrong? How did it come to this? Are not the righteous supposed to prevail? This was all his doing. Things could have been so different if he had only made other choices, especially if he hadn't just made another choice in particular so long ago. None of this would have happened. The consequences of his action lay all around him in the mud, the blood, and the fire. Now the grand experiment that had been Green Springs on the island of Avalon and all its hopes were going to a bloody end. And once Amy was captured with her precious charge, the world would never be the same either. Patrick would not be there to witness all that because he was about to die, killed by his own brother. Patrick's sword arm dipped, and the plain dinner cup that was in his other hand slipped from his grasp to tumble into the mud in which he knelt. The sword was almost to his face now, moving so slow it may as well have been standing still. But it wasn't, for he could see its sharpened edge pass through a fat raindrop, slowly parting it like a quivering bead of quicksilver. As he watched the drop separate on the blade, Patrick noticed his own reflection in the metal. In the reflection, he could see a figure that was at his back walking towards him. Another attacker coming from behind? But this figure was moving at a normal pace, not in slow motion like everything else around him. Once it was right behind him, Patrick could see clearly who it was in the reflection. The swords truly did stop moving now. The raindrop was frozen in place. The world had completely froze as well. "Rise, Patrick," a voice said behind him. Patrick did as commanded. Coming to a standing position, from his knees and turned to face the newcomer. "You," Patrick said. Before him was a mirror image of himself, though his other self's dark shoulder-length hair was not plastered against his scalp from rain and sweat. Nor was he wearing Patrick's torn and bloody black avant-garde surcoat with the white swan emblem on the chest. He did not have rent armor with chainmail links spilling all over the place, and the other's face, with its high cheekbones and light complexion, was not cut, bloodied, bruised, and covered with mud. His hazel green eyes, with a hint of gold circling the pupils, were intense, not defeated like Patrick's. Once Patrick referred to him as the apparition, because when he came during his silent, unsettling visitations, he wore a cowled robe with no visible face. Nowadays, he came wearing Patrick's face, in a sort of simple cassock of forgettable color. Patrick couldn't help but notice that his visitor still preferred to wear gloves, which he noticed now when the other hooked his thumbs in a belt cinched about his waist. Also, the other was no longer silent, though Patrick often wished that he were. "Have you come to save me at the last moment again?" Patrick asked. "No," the other responded, gesturing with a nod toward where Patrick had been on his knees moments before. Patrick frowned and looked in the direction. To his surprise, he saw that he was still there, on his knees, with the approaching sword dangerously close to his head, all frozen in time. Patrick staggered back and looked down at his hands. He still wore his bloodied and muddied gauntlets, but he held no sword or cup. He gasped and patted himself down to make sure he was still material. As far as he could tell, he was solid. Realizing he was on the verge of panic, he calmed himself. It just wouldn't do to lose one's composure in front of oneself. "Well, this is a new one," he said wryly. "What does it mean? Am I dead then?" The other shook his head. "Not yet, but you will be unless you do something quick." Patrick shrugged. "So do something. Step in as you did when I fought Loki and he had the upper hand." What could only be described as a sneer, however faint, curled on the other's lip. "I'm here to help you help yourself this time," he responded. "Just moments ago, you lowered your sword arm. You weren't even trying. You must find it in yourself to fend off the blow." Patrick sagged and ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of grime. "Why? Why do you care? Who are you? What are you? Why won't you tell me?" he asked. The other approached the frozen, still kneeling Patrick and bent over to scrutinize his face as if it were the most fascinating of insects. "Much rise on your success here. You must hold on," he said. Patrick chuckled a mirthless and sarcastic chuckle. "Success? Define success." The other turned his gaze back on Patrick with a stern look. "This is not a game. You must fight until the end."